Many people think that coherence is calm, clear, and steady. But in reality, coherence shows up inside of emotion, not instead of it. In my last video, I touched on a definition of coherence as a way of making the term a bit more grounded and accessible for those of us that have come across the term and maybe seek to understand it or embody the experience of coherence more in our lives. And in this series of videos, I will seek to explore that more fully. What does coherence look like in action? What does loss of coherence look like in action? And really maybe demystifying a few myths around this term coherence. I guess to start with, one myth to really start this discussion is that coherence is perhaps seen by some to be the absence of a reaction, that there is no emotional response if we're in a state of coherence, which I would suggest is not the case. It may even be interpreted by some people to be a mark of reaching some kind of state of spiritual maturity, that you're able to have certain circumstances show up and not experience any kind of emotional response or reaction. And I think this is most definitely a myth, because I would encourage you to look at coherence as being able to remain in a certain state even while the emotion is activated or present. So coherence does not mean the absence of motion. And incoherence is certainly not failure, and I've used that word or that phrase a few times in response to, or in relation to, some of my other videos talking about moments of strong emotions presenting. And again, I feel it's important to reinforce, if you haven't referenced those other videos, that incoherence is not failure. It is simply information. It is simply a sign that something inside of us needs attention, and to potentially attend to it with the right kind of curious and compassionate attitude, which is certainly not how we're raised in Western society, particularly. That we're raised to see, for most of us anyway, that strong, intense emotions like anxiety and fear, sadness, anger, are all the types of emotions that we should eradicate and pull away from, because they are the so-called bad feelings or negative emotions. Where in truth, these types of emotional responses are simply indicators of imbalance or aspects of ourselves that need our attention. And so if you think about it, if coherence was just what showed up when in the absence of emotion, then what is the benefit of a coherent state? It's simply the absence of a reaction. So it's not about what is there when nothing's happening, when we're not being challenged, when we're not being tested. Coherence is far more beneficial as an experience to or a state to explore, to help us navigate those times when emotions have been activated. And another myth that I'd like to touch on here is that the activation of an emotion, such as the ones that I just listed off a moment ago, is not necessarily a sign of dysregulation. It can be tempting to just clump all types of intense emotions, particularly the ones, again, that we term as being the negative or the bad ones, into this category of, oh, I've become dysregulated because I'm feeling anxiety, overwhelm, etc. Having said that, a loss of coherence certainly can be associated with experiences of overwhelm, but it again doesn't have to be seen as this monumental failure on our behalves to have gone into a state of overwhelm. It's not regression. It again is simply information that something needs our attention, and potentially we've failed to register the earlier signals that maybe a behavioural change needed to be brought in to deal with the mounting demands that have been placed upon us, that some kind of emotion we have suppressed over a period of time that then is seeking to find its way to the surface. So again, even states of overwhelm, which I guess could be classified as a more incoherent state, are not disastrous. It's certainly not a failure. In the last video, I used the metaphor of an orchestra to help explain what coherence is. That coherence is the nervous system organizing or aligning in terms of the mind, the body, and emotions all working in alignment with each other or pulling together in some kind of way. The metaphor of the orchestra was meant to highlight that each of those individual components, mind, body, emotion, if all playing their own song, so to speak, can create more of a noise than a beautiful piece of music. And when there is a sense of aligning those elements, for example, acknowledging that the body is giving us a signal, mentally not buying into some kind of negative story about what that signal in the body of an emotion showing up is, and making space for that emotion to work its way through you, that could be seen as a coherent state. It's not having to get rid of it. It's not any kind of fixing, bypassing, problem solving it. It's the mind supporting the bodily and emotional experience. And another way to look at coherence is to stay with an emotional experience rather than abandoning yourself through it, or the ability to feel what you feel without abandoning yourself. And that could be thought of as maintaining this sense of your core, of your essence, and even that sense of still being able to observe what's unfolding rather than being completely taken over by it. I'm a real big fan of the metaphor of the sky versus the weather. There's one that I use in my everyday practice with clients, and I use it to help differentiate between thoughts and feelings and the you that is the observer. So the sky being the essence of who we are, this silent, non-judgmental, observing aspect that is our core self, or you could call it self with a capital S, and this and the weather being these constantly changing thoughts and feelings that you can't stop. You're going to have varied weather throughout your day, your week, and to think that you can control the weather, your internal weather, is pretty unrealistic. But to find that sense of being the sky whilst the weather passes through you, or having a sense of just even a slight separation between the sky and the weather, is, again, a good example of what I would define as remaining in a coherent state whilst emotion presents. So if I apply this to my own personal life, and I can't help but find that that intimate relationships, or my romantic relationship, provides one of the best opportunities to work through moving in and out of states of coherence, or seeing how coherence has become more of a mainstay in my way of dealing with strong emotions as I've, I guess, done the work myself personally. And if I look back to how I would deal with an interpersonal disagreement or conflict within my relationships previously, I would tighten up, I would defend myself, I would seek to pull away, combination of all three of those potentially. And what's changed now isn't that some of the same sorts of emotions that would drive those sorts of responses have gone, so I can still have moments of feeling quite rejected or hurt by something my partner has said or done. But it's what happens next that is the key to moving through that with a sense of coherence. I can think of an example where my partner completely shut down on me, went into a more internalized state. It, in hindsight, wasn't necessarily about me at all, that shutdown response, but it felt like she was disrespecting me by not communicating, and I felt that familiar urge to want to do the same. Well, if you're going to shut down on me, I'll shut down on you. And sensing that that rejected emotion presenting in me in this moment as we're driving in the car, and I was able to quickly register that the thought, that would have taken me into a more incoherent state, or using the metaphor I just used a moment ago, becoming the weather. So not being able to have this sense of separation from my internal weather and merging fully with the rejected set of emotions that I was experiencing, and to actually catch it in mid-flight, that, okay, here's what's showing up. There's my rejected part seeking to do its thing again, and a protective element seeking to come in and pull away, but just observing it, recognizing it, seeing that familiar pattern was trying to unfold but didn't, was a real sign of progress for me when I was able to really register that moment as it happened, and have seen more of those moments unfold in interpersonal dynamics over the course of my relationship. So yeah, that to me is what I would identify as a great example of coherence in the presence of emotion. And now I'd like to invite you to have a similar kind of exploration, as I like to do in these videos. Invite you as the viewer to either close your eyes or just lower your eyes potentially and shift the awareness internally so that you can have a moment to explore this concept of coherence or lack of as it has shown up in your life. So I invite you to take a moment that you can recall where some strong or moderately strong emotion moved through you, such as an irritation, sadness, or defensiveness, and allow yourself to revisit that memory. And just notice what shows up in the body. It might not be really pronounced, it might be subtle. But nevertheless, acknowledge the sensations that show up around this emotion as you remember it, the echo of this emotion. Take note of what impulses showed up around this emotion at the time. Was it an urge to attack, flee, defend, blame, retreat, or shut down? Or some other impulse? Maybe even sulk. And take note of whether you stayed with the emotion or whether you disappeared. And the weather, so to speak, took over you. Were you able to stay as the sky, as the witness, the observer, and allow it to move through you? Without necessarily changing your behaviour or falling into an habitual behaviour. It's okay if you did. Acknowledge that happened if that is what happened. And in this moment you can maybe have a little redo, have a do-over, if you like, in registering how you would like to have been through that moment and how you would like to be in future moments that might be similar. You don't need to calm the emotion. You just need to stay. Stay with it. And now just take your time to slowly reorient yourself back to the external world if you had your eyes closed during that little moment. As we bring it all together. In closing, coherence is not about not being affected emotionally. It's about recognizing when something is unfolding and choosing to remain with yourself instead of abandoning yourself as it all unfolds. And when we can do this, emotional regulation unfolds naturally and becomes lived rather than something we have to manage. Thank you for watching.